I'm experiencing as I turn to investigate the self that comes up with the future scenarios, past stories that I've historically believed in with real verve, that I'm able to see quite clearly now. And over this week, it's been wonderful, by the way, just through the meditations, that it is literally just a story that's being told. And sometimes it's in Technicolor with a whole future version of me carrying on and having reactions and all of that. I see it very clearly, and I see that there is only me observing it, that I am the witness watching all of this. The part that I struggle with, and it's a little bit akin to the prior question, is having seen that, in that instance, it loses its power over me. And yet another story arises shortly thereafter. And I asked you an earlier question where you suggested find your way home, go back. Is that the advice again, that at some point does the knowledge, when does the knowledge kick over into this is all BS and I am just me awareness, as opposed to this constant tortured draw back into the Technicolor storyline?
I'm not quite sure that I've understood your question, but talking about the stories you were talking about earlier, it's true that our beliefs about ourselves condition the way we experience ourselves and the way we experience in the world. And so in this process, our ideas about ourselves become more and more and more refined until ultimately there are no ideas about ourselves, because it's not possible to have a true idea about yourself ultimately. So we limit ourselves by really only by our beliefs, and our experience in the world appears in conformity with our belief of ourself. And that is why many people find that as their belief in their self as the belief expands or dissolves, there is a corresponding response from the universe, because it's all one system. We often feel that it is the universe that is limiting us. No, it is our beliefs that are preventing the universe from appearing to us as she really is. Give you an example. If you have a desire, if you have a personal desire, this desire comes from a misunderstanding of the nature of reality. And therefore you make it very difficult for the universe to fulfill that idea, because you're not treating her how she really is. But if you have a desire that is impersonal, that desire comes from your intuition or your knowledge of reality, and it makes it easy for the universe to fulfill that desire. Because you are treating her in a way that is, in the way she really is. Therefore it makes it easy for her to respond. So that would be an example of the way our beliefs about ourselves limit us. And in this process here, our beliefs about ourselves, they get broader and broader, and until we have no belief about ourselves, and then we put no restraints on reality.
So the return to I am is the easiest recipe for
absolutely
dissolving.
Because you don't actually have to attend to each belief by belief. You just go to yourself until it's clear that what yourself is devoid of any of the finite qualities that our beliefs previously superimposed on it. And that understanding will slowly dissolve your beliefs from the inside. Your beliefs will fall away without your ever having worked on them. So yes, to go to the knowledge of yourself, that is the easiest, the quickest, the most enjoyable, the most direct way, yes.
Thank you.
when I was in college or school and you learn something that is different from what you knew, from that point onwards, the mind doesn't really go back to that old way of thinking and it just stops. So my question is, when in my daily life right now, if I do the self-investigation of on whose behalf are these thoughts arising or these emotions arising, and I then don't find any self that is that, and that is clear. But then I wonder, why is it not the end of it, and why there's always this tendency of the mind to go back again in that direction? I understand when you mentioned that the body survives the self-realization and that you need yoga meditations to slowly cleanse that. But I'm kind of not sure why the mind is that way, because...
But the only reason the mind goes out again towards objective experience in the hopes of achieving happiness or finding happiness there is because it has not yet fully tasted the happiness that lies at its source. That's the only reason the mind goes out into the world seeking happiness. There are other good reasons for the mind to turn outwards towards experience, practical reasons, creative reasons, investigating the truth. All of these are perfectly legitimate uses of the mind. The only activity of the mind that stops when on the recognition of the nature of our being is the mind's search for happiness in objective experience. Why does it come to an end? Not through discipline, not because we've cut off the mind or disciplined the mind or detached the mind or anything like that. It's just that the mind has found what it wants at its source. And therefore there is no impulse to go out into the world in search of happiness. There may still be an impulse to go out into the world for the reasons I gave, but no longer on account of the search for happiness.
So even for the mind, you still recommend doing the yoga meditations to cleanse that as well?
The yoga meditations we do are more to do with realigning the way we feel the body and perceive the world. It is in these conversations that the mind or the beliefs in the mind or the ideas in the mind get realigned. But the yoga meditations are more to do with the experience of the body and the world. They are the means by which we reconcile our new understanding with the way we feel the body and perceive the world. Am I answering your question? Or is there something I'm missing?
I'm thinking of situations where, so for the most part, there is a clarity of mind or the thoughts being the illusion, and so I don't get sucked into that. And at that point, it's very clear. But then, of course, there are some intense moments where the mind is, the thought activity is so intense, and mind gets, and attention gets lodged into that. At that point, reminding myself that this is still an illusion, or doing the self-investigation of who are these thoughts coming on behalf of, it doesn't seem that it is doing anything to the intensity. It seems it's still there. So I just thought that logically, if you knew that this is still an illusion, then you shouldn't really...
Just because something, sorry to interrupt you, just because something is an illusion is not a good reason for not necessarily paying attention to it. The world, ultimately, is an illusion. Please don't misunderstand me. I don't mean by that it's not real. The world is real. But the world is not what it appears to be. It's real, but it's not what it appears to be. In that sense, it's an illusion. It's not non-existent. It is existent, but it's not what it appears to be. So, yes, in that sense, the world is an illusion, but that is not a reason for not paying attention to it. We should pay attention to the world. It's appropriate, as long as we are alive as this apparent body, it's appropriate to be engaged with with people and the world, activities and relationships. Yes, ultimately they are an illusion in the sense that they're real, but they are not what they appear to be. But that is not a reason for neglecting them.
So then, would you say then just keep following the outward practice of just allowing the...
I would recommend following both the inward-facing path and the outward-facing path. Just to keep following both these paths until more and more you feel that the being that shines in you as the knowledge I am, and the being that shines in the world as the knowledge it is the same being. The amness of yourself and the isness of all things is the same being. So just keep investigating until you don't just understand, but you feel that everyone and everything borrows their existence from a single, infinite, indivisible whole, whose nature is pure being or self-aware being. And once you just go deeper and deeper and deeper, endlessly deeper into that feeling understanding until your experience of the world begins to be outshone by this understanding. You still see the world, you still relate to the world, but the world is progressively, your experience of yourself and your experience of others and the world is progressively outshone by this feeling understanding. So that in time all your experience is shining with the light of God's presence. And that still enables you to relate with the world in whatever way you want, to relate with people, to earn your living, to have a family or not, as you please. You can still lead a fully engaged life in the world and still have this, go deeper and deeper into this feeling attitude.
I am totally guilty of sometimes appropriating the non-dual understanding to my separate self, and I really don't want to do that because I don't want to ruin the teaching for myself and especially not for others. And I just want to know what you would recommend in terms of when that comes up and I catch it, to either investigate the self on whose behalf it arises or to abide in myself.
Just give me a little bit more information. You don't need to be too personal about it if you don't want. Give me a bit more information about what you mean when you say that the separate self appropriates the non-dual teaching.
Like, for example, if I, let's say I'm abiding and I recognize, I'm totally happy, this is truth, and then a thought will come in and grab and say, oh yeah, I am reality.
You claim it personally. You claim it as your personal achievement.
Yes, or say, I have this special knowledge that only I know, or a few people know and other people don't. It's something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, so your question is: should you investigate, or should you abide in yourself in that situation? That they amount to the same thing. The investigation is just the prelude. Self-investigation or self-inquiry is the prelude to self-abidance. When King Lear is investigating himself, he's tracing his way back through his experience. My thoughts are not essential to me, my feelings are not essential to me, my activities and relationships are not essential to me. He's investigating his true nature. And then at some point there is this recognition, I am John Smith. And then John Smith rests or abides as John Smith, that is self-abidance. So the question of whether to investigate yourself or whether to abide as yourself, the answer is if it is not clear what yourself is, then investigate yourself. But if it is clear who you are, be that knowingly. And don't worry if it's not clear to you at any moment who exactly you are, because as long as you investigate yourself, that investigation will take you very quickly to yourself. And doing that will take care of the old habit that may rise from time to time that claims your knowledge or your understanding. So don't worry about it. That's just an old habit of the ego. Don't reprimand yourself about that, because that would just be a way of subtly perpetuating the separate self. So just notice, okay, this is an old habit that is still alive in me, and just use the opportunity to investigate the self who is claiming the experience. That takes you back to yourself. You abide there, and the more you do so, the less this claiming I will rise. You'll just notice that it just starts appearing less and less in your life, without your having ever disciplined it or tried to get rid of it or judged it.
My request is to help me with a little confusion, which is, on the one hand, in the meditation yesterday and the day before, there were these long periods, maybe hours, of just being happy, just deeply, wonderfully soaked in happiness. And I don't know if it was an old speck of the seeker or a sincere desire to just go deeper. Hard to say. And it was, I've been following normally I wouldn't translate enlightenment as happiness, but I wanted to follow your guidance. And on the other hand, there's a memory of a time where for days the character of King Lear was just completely dropped away. I couldn't coming home to my wife without any thought. I started to refer to myself as it, just naturally. Jonathan was gone. Now it continued to live Jonathan's life naturally. It was lovely. Saw my clients, did my teaching. It was all great. And in retrospect, I can't discern if that was merely a state experience, albeit a wonderful and powerful one, or if that was really a very deep experience of true nature. And the happiness was very much present. And so this week has been just very, I use the word soft focus. So just lovely. But so to sum it up, on the one hand, I don't want, it's been 40 years or something of seeking. I don't want to unnecessarily keep holding on to it. On the other hand, because there is such a devotion or sincerity or passion to go all the way, whatever that might mean, I don't want to call off the deepening prematurely.
Yes. Try to let go of the idea of going all the way. Because in the idea of going all the way, there is still a residual sense that the finishing line will one day be crossed. But just try to completely abandon the sense of there being a finishing line, there being a way to go. And that is not tantamount to doing nothing. But just think of sinking deeply into your being. Don't think that you're going to sink so deeply into your being that one day you'll hit the bottom. Your being is like an ocean without a bottom. Just think of endlessly sinking into being, with no sense of direction or purpose or a way to go, or it's just you're just sinking into being. So there's just this. It's an old residue. This idea of going all the way. It's just a little residue of the old seeking self that is superimposed on top of simply sinking into being. And so you never have the sense, I'm finished or I'm enlightened. At the same time, you never have a sense of there is something to achieve. And just going back to what you first said about coming home, I want to tweak your formulation a little bit. When you, about coming home and referring to yourself as it, and that the Jonathan character is an expression of that, think of the name Jonathan not as the name of your character, but one of the many names of yourself. That's why they're called Christian names. That means they are our Christian names are the names of Christ. The names of the Christ principle in us. They are the names of our being. So don't call it it. When you think Jonathan, think that Jonathan is the name of your being, one of the numerous names. Each of our names are one of the numerous names of being. All names ultimately are the names of being, which ultimately cannot be named. But at the same time, each of our names is the name of that one.
I seem to be like, especially in the past, whenever I had a panic moment, I could always think, oh, for me it was a he. He's there too. He's protecting me. He was my screen. Now you're telling me I'm the screen, and I'm trying to make sense of the two.
Yes, your previous devotion to a God who is other than yourself has served you very well, but it's run its course. You cannot have a relationship with God. Because to believe that you can have a relationship with God is to set yourself up as a being or a self apart from God's being. And that is blasphemy. Because if you consider that you are a being apart from God's being, then God's being cannot be infinite, because you are apart from it. And if God's being is not infinite, then that God is not really God. He or she is a projection of your own imagination, a projection of an inevitable consequence of your belief in yourself as a temporary finite self. And although your devotion to that God will focus and curtail the separate self that you believe yourself to be, and is as such valuable in the early stages of your devotion, at some stage you have to see that the being that you consider yourself to be is simply an apparent limitation of the only being there is, God's infinite being. King Lear cannot have a relationship with John Smith because there is no such person as King Lear, apart from John Smith, either to have a relationship with him or not have a relationship with him. It is only the arrogance of King Lear, who believes, and I'm not implying that you are arrogant, please don't misunderstand me, it is only the arrogance of King Lear who believes that he is a self apart from King Lear, and thus feels that he is related to King Lear. And in this way, King Lear perpetuates, albeit in a very noble way, his belief of himself as a separate self. Likewise, the devotee of God, which is undoubtedly one of the highest activities that the separate self can engage in. So it is a very noble activity. But nevertheless, it is an activity that ultimately perpetuates the apparently separate self's belief in itself. And although it is a necessary stage for many of us, as it has been for you in the early stages of your investigation, at some stage it must be abandoned. There is no separate self, either to be related or not related to God's presence. There is just the self that shines in all of us as the feeling of being or the knowledge I am. That is the only self there is. And as it is not limited to or any particular apparent individual, it is without limits. That infinite being or self is what's called God. It shines in you as your knowledge of yourself, before yourself has been colored or qualified by experience. So the highest form of devotion to God is to take the thought I am and go there. That is devotion to God.
Thank you.